A Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder. Chapter 21, Part 1. Hannah had just turned over the baking to Lisa and poured herself a cup of coffee when the phone rang. That's gotta be Mother. She's the only one who calls me this time of the morning. Do you want me to get it? Lisa offered, helpfully, even though her hands were covered with powdered sugar. No, it'll only postpone the inevitable. Hannah lifted the receiver and gave her a standard greeting. The cookie jar, Hannah speaking. I'm so glad I caught you, dear. I promised the girls I'd check. Are you booked for second Thursday in December? Hannah stretched out the phone cord and walked over to her calendar, flipping the pages to December. No one booked this early, and Hannah knew that her mother was just fishing for information about Max Turner. I'm free, Mother. Good. I joined a new group. That's nice. Hannah gave the appropriate response. She really should be more grateful. Dolores had become a joiner since Hannah's father had died, and her groups always booked Hannah to cater their events. What's the name of this group, Mother? The Lake Eden Quilting Society, dear. They meet every Thursday in the back room at Trudy's Fabrics. Hannah obediently wrote down the information, but she was puzzled. As far as she knew, her mother had never picked up a needle in her life. You're sewing now, Mother? Good heavens, no. I managed to find them 2 quilting frames at an auction last month, and they awarded me an honorary membership. I just go to be sociable. How many groups does that make now, Mother? 12. When your father died, Ruth told me that I should develop outside interests. I'm just taking her advice. You're taking Ruth's advice seriously? Hannah was shocked. Ruth, one of her mother's neighbors, had volunteered to do grief counseling at the community center after only one 2-credit class at the community college. Ruth's a dingbat, and you said so yourself. And she's not qualified to counsel anyone. I'm surprised she didn't suggest Sati. Dolores laughed. You're right, dear. But that's illegal, even in India. Very good, Mother. Hannah complimented her. Dolores' sense of humor kicked in, and those were the times when Hannah liked her the best. What kind of cookies would you like? How about those chocolate-covered cherry delights? Andrea told me that they were fabulous. Hannah jotted it down, and then she realized what her mother had said. Andrea had tasted those cookies for the first time last night. If she'd mentioned them to Dolores, it must have been earlier this morning. Did you call Andrea this morning, Mother? Yes, dear. We had a lovely chat. As a matter of fact, I just got off the phone with her. Hannah's eyes widened. Her sister was not a morning person. You called Andrea before 8? On a Saturday? Of course I did. I wanted to make sure she was all right. The poor dear sounded dreadful. She told me that her head was still reeling from that awful migraine. Hannah started to grin. It wasn't surprising that Andrea's head was reeling. She'd polished off 4 glasses of that impotent little wine before Bill had come to drive her home. I've got to run, Mother. It's late, and I have to get ready to open the shop. You don't open until 9 this morning. How about Max Turner? I heard on the radio that he was dead. Hannah rolled her eyes at Lisa, who was trying not to be amused at her attempt to end the conversation. That's true, Mother. I know it's not nice to speak ill of the dead, but Max made a lot of enemies here in Lake Eden. I don't think anyone is going to shed tears for him. Really? Hannah thought she knew exactly what her mother was talking about, but she wanted to hear it from Dolores. Why is that? Max, he wasn't a nice man, Hannah. I don't want you to repeat this, but I heard that several families lost their homes because of Max Turner. Really? Hannah did her best to sound as if this was the first she'd heard of it. He was... Dolores paused, and Hannah knew that she was attempting to think of the proper word. What's that term, Hannah? I know it has something to do with a fish. A loan shark? That's right. You have such a good vocabulary, dear. I think it all comes from the reading you did as a child. I wonder what'll happen to those loans now. I don't know, Hannah replied, making a mental note to ask Bill if he'd found any current loan papers in the stack of files he'd confiscated from Max's safe. But those files would only serve to eliminate suspects. If Max had been killed over a current loan, his killer would have taken the papers. "I've already had 4 calls this morning about Max," Dolores informed her. "The whole town's talking, and everybody's got a story to tell." That gave Hannah an idea, and she started to smile. Dolores belonged to a dozen groups, and she heard all the gossip. What if a mother heard about a loan that Max had made, a name that wasn't on any of the files that Bill had removed from the safe? That person could very well be Max's killer. "Will you do something for me, Mother?" "Of course, dear. What is it?" "Keep your ears open and call me if you hear anyone discussing any business dealings with Max. It's important. I really need to know." "All right, dear. I'm sure there'll be talk. There always is. But I don't see why it's so important." Dolores stopped, and Hannah heard her gasp. "They didn't go into any details about Max's death on the radio. Was he murdered?" Hannah groaned. There were times when Dolores was much too perceptive to suit her. "I'm not supposed to say anything about that. It could cost Bill his promotion." "Then I won't breathe a word. You can count on me, Hannah. I'd never do anything to hurt Bill's career. But it's just going to kill me not to tell Carrie." "I know. But the news should break any minute. Just keep listening to the radio." "How do you know? Did Bill tell you, or—" Dolores gasped again. "Don't tell me that you discovered Max's body." "I really can't talk about it, Mother." There was another lengthy pause, and then Dolores sighed. "You really have to stop this, Hannah. You're going to scare all the eligible men off if you keep on finding these murder victims. The only one who might give you a second chance would be a homicide detective." "I suppose you're right." Hannah started to grin. Perhaps finding bodies wasn't so bad after all. "I really do have to run, Mother. Just remember to call me if you hear anything, okay?" Hannah hung up and turned to Lisa. "That woman can talk longer than anyone I know." "Mothers are like that," Lisa responded, but she looked very grave. "I couldn't help hearing your end of the conversation. Was Max murdered?" "I'm afraid he was." "That doesn't surprise me. He was a loan shark. One of our neighbors almost borrowed some money from him, but Dad looked over the papers and told him not to sign. He ended up getting a bank loan instead." Hannah was about to ask her the neighbor's name when she realized that it didn't really matter. If the neighbor hadn't signed, he'd had no motive to kill Max. "Why don't you sit down, Hannah? You look beat, and it's only 8:30. And think seriously about taking the day off. You know I can handle things here." "Thanks, Lisa. I'm really tempted." Hannah sat down on the stool at the end of the work island and thought about a day off. She could go home, brush Moish, watch a little television, and call in 1,000,000 times to find out what was happening. It was better to stay here, in the thick of things. "Thanks for offering, but I wouldn't rest anyway." "Okay, if you change your mind, just let me know." "What do you want me to bake when I finish with the black and whites?" "The old-fashioned sugar cookies," Hannah answered. "They should be chilled by now. There's only one batch of dough." "Do you want me to roll them in white sugar or mixed?" "Just white. When they're cool, pick out a dozen of the best and pack them for shipping. I promised to send a sample box to the Woodley's caterer." Lisa looked pleased. "New business?" "Maybe. You haven't said anything about the party. Did you have a good time?" "It was fantastic, Hannah. I've never been to such a fancy party before. It's just too bad that we had to leave early." "Herb was called out to the accident scene." "No, but he thought he should go anyway. I had him drop me off at home before he went out there. I didn't feel like staying at the party alone. He called me later and he said it was a miracle no one had been killed. 17 cars! Can you imagine that?" "Unfortunately, I can. I'd better go up front, Lisa. It's almost time to open." As she went through the swinging door, Hannah thought about the massive car pileup she'd almost joined on the interstate last year. All it took was one patch of ice, a lapse in judgment, and several drivers following too closely. She'd taken the shoulder to avoid hitting the huge Red Owl grocery truck ahead of her, and she'd considered herself fortunate to wind up in a soft, snowy ditch.